The continent that remembers everything Antarctica is the most hostile place on Earth that is not actively trying to kill you through violence. It is simply cold. Consistently, completely, permanently cold. Cold enough that the ice covering it is in places nearly 5 kilometers deep. Cold enough that objects buried inside it stop decaying, stop changing, stop becoming anything other than what they were the moment the ice closed over them. Antarctica is not a graveyard. Graveyards decompose their contents. Antarctica is something worse. It is a freezer. And like every freezer that has ever been opened after too long, what is inside is not gone. It is waiting. These are 10 of the things that were waiting. A forest. We start with something that should not exist where it was found. Beneath the ice of Antarctica, there is a forest. Not the remains of a few scattered trees. A forest. With roots intact, with bark preserved, with the cellular structure of the wood still clear enough for botanists to identify the species. The trees are 280 million years old. They lived during the Permian period, when Antarctica was not a frozen continent near the South Pole, but a temperate landmass closer to the equator, covered in vegetation, warm enough to sustain life for most of the year. Then the plates shifted. The continent drifted south over millions of years. The temperature dropped. The forest did not burn or rot or sink into the earth. It simply froze, mid-life, and stayed that way. Scientists who study these trees can see their growth rings. They can read the seasons those trees live through. They can tell which years had more sunlight and which had more cloud cover. They are reading the diary of a forest that died before the dinosaurs existed. Blood that still runs red. In 2013, Russian scientists drilling into the Antarctic ice extracted something that stopped them completely. From a mammoth recovered from the permafrost, not in Antarctica itself, but in the Siberian ice connected to the same ancient freeze, dark liquid seeped out of the carcass into the snow below. It was blood, still liquid, still red, still recognizable as blood after 10,000 years in the ice. Blood freezes. Everyone knows this. But mammoth blood contains a specific adaptation, a variant of hemoglobin that binds and releases oxygen differently at low temperatures, one that prevents freezing at the cellular level in ways that normal mammalian blood does not. The mammoths evolved this adaptation to survive the Ice Age. Their blood was, in a very literal sense, antifreeze. Scientists extracted intact DNA from that sample. They are currently using it, along with other recovered specimens, in an active project to bring the woolly mammoth back from extinction. The blood that ran out into the Siberian snow may yet flow again, in something living. A lake that has not touched the surface world in 15 million years. 4 kilometers beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, there is a lake, Lake Vostok. It is roughly the size of Lake Ontario. It has liquid water. It has enough geothermal heat from the Earth's core to stay unfrozen at that depth. It may have oxygen and nutrients enough to support life, and it has been completely sealed from the surface world for approximately 15 million years. Whatever is in that lake has been evolving in total isolation for 15 million years, without sunlight, without contact with any other ecosystem, without any of the outside pressures, predators, climate shifts, competition, that shaped every other living thing on Earth. When Russian scientists finally drilled into it in 2012, they found bacterial life, microbial organisms that do not match anything in existing databases. Organisms whose evolutionary lineage appears to have diverged from all known life sometime before the lake sealed itself shut. We found something genuinely new, something that had been evolving alone in the dark under 4 kilometers of ice since before our earliest hominid ancestors walked upright. We have not fully characterized what we found. We are still working on it. The lake is still down there. Ancient air. The ice cores drilled from Antarctica are among the most important scientific objects on Earth, and one of the reasons is something most people never think about. As snow falls and compresses into ice over thousands of years, it traps the air that was present at the time. Tiny bubbles, sealed inside the ice, containing the exact composition of the atmosphere from the moment that layer of snow became permanent. Scientists have extracted air bubbles from Antarctic ice that are 800,000 years old. They have analyzed what was in them. They know, with precision, what the atmosphere of Earth smelled like, what its oxygen content was, what its carbon dioxide concentration was, across 800 millennia of climate history. They have also found something in the more recent layers, the last 200 years, that has no precedent in those 800,000 years of data. The CO2 concentration in the atmosphere is higher now than at any recorded point in that entire period. Not slightly higher, not within the natural range of variation, higher by a margin that has no historical analog. The ice remembered everything, and what it remembered about right now is the most alarming entry in the record. A virus 30,000 years old? That still works. In 2014, French scientists revived a virus from Siberian permafrost. They called it Pathovirus sibericum. It was 30,000 years old. It had been frozen since the last ice age, and when they introduced it to a single-celled organism in a laboratory, it infected it. Successfully. The virus still worked. In 2023, the same research group identified and revived multiple additional ancient viruses from permafrost samples, the oldest of which had been frozen for approximately 48,500 years. The viruses revived in that study target only single-celled organisms. They do not infect humans. That is the finding as it currently stands. But the implications extend further. If these viruses, frozen for tens of thousands of years, can still function after revival, then the permafrost that is currently melting across the Arctic and subarctic regions of the world is not just releasing carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. It is releasing things that have been frozen since before modern humans existed. We do not know everything that is in there. We do not have a complete inventory of what the ice has been holding. We are finding out now, as it thaws in real time. A creature that came back to life after 24,000 years. In 2021, Russian scientists published a study in the journal Current Biology. They had extracted a microscopic organism called a bdelloid rotifer from Arctic permafrost sediment. Rotifers are tiny aquatic animals, multicellular, with a nervous system, a digestive tract, and reproductive organs. They are not bacteria. They are animals. The sample had been frozen for 24,000 years. When thawed, the rotifer began to move. It reproduced. It created an entire clonal colony of organisms descended from a single animal that had been frozen since the last ice age, roughly the same period when humans were first beginning to develop cave art in Europe. The scientists confirmed the age using radiocarbon dating. 24,000 years. Not dormant spores, not resistant eggs. An adult animal, frozen, revived, alive. We do not have a complete understanding of how this is biologically possible. The organism has mechanisms for repairing DNA damage that are far more sophisticated than anything else known at that scale. It survived 24,000 years of freezing. It survived the thaw. It is currently alive in a laboratory in Russia, reproducing normally, entirely untroubled by the gap. The bodies of men who knew they were not coming back. In 1912, Robert Falcon Scott and 4 companions reached the South Pole after a brutal overland journey, only to find that a Norwegian team had arrived 5 weeks earlier. They turned around and began the march back. They did not make it. Scott and his men died in their tent, 11 miles from a supply depot that might have saved them, in a blizzard that pinned them down for 9 days. Scott's final diary entry is dated March 29, 1912. It ends mid-thought. Their bodies were found 8 months later by a search party. They were still in the tent. They were frozen. Scott and 2 of his companions were buried where they lay, under a cairn of ice. The tent was collapsed over them. The Antarctic ice slowly absorbed them. Scientists have calculated that the bodies are currently moving through the ice at roughly 8 meters per year, carried by the slow flow of the Ross ice shelf toward the sea. In approximately 275 years, the ice will calve at the shelf edge, and what remains of Scott and his companions will be released into the Southern Ocean. The ice is not done with them yet. A mountain range the size of the Alps, completely hidden. There is a mountain range beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, called the Gomburtsev Subglacial Mountains. They are roughly the size of the Alps, peaks reaching over 3,000 meters. Valleys, ridges, river channels carved by water that flowed there millions of years ago. No human has ever seen them. No light has touched them in at least 34 million years, when the Antarctic ice sheet first formed and covered them completely. They exist in total, permanent darkness, under kilometers of ice, and they will continue to exist that way for as long as the ice sheet stands. We know they are there because of radar, instruments on aircraft and satellites that can see through ice the way an X-ray sees through skin. The mountains themselves have never been touched. Every lake, every valley, every feature of that buried landscape is pristine, untouched by air, by light, by any organism that has not been specifically adapted to that total isolation for millions of years. We have mapped them from the surface. We have named their peaks and measured their elevations. We have built a detailed picture of a mountain range that no human eye has ever seen and very possibly never will. There is something in that which is harder to name than terror, something closer to the feeling of standing at the edge of something that makes the scale of your entire life feel very, very small. Microbes that eat radiation. In the subglacial lakes and deep ice cores of Antarctica, scientists have recovered microorganisms that do not behave like anything in the existing catalog of life. Some of them appear to metabolize not organic material, not sunlight, not chemical gradients in the water, but radiation. Specifically, the low-level radiation produced by the natural radioactive decay of minerals in the rock beneath the ice. This process is called radiotrophic metabolism. It was first identified in fungi growing on the walls of the Chernobyl reactor, organisms that were actively colonizing the most radioactive environment on Earth, not despite the radiation, but because of it. Finding similar metabolic strategies in Antarctic ice suggests that life, given enough time and enough isolation, will find a way to consume almost anything, including energy sources that should be incompatible with biology as we currently define it. This matters beyond Antarctica. If life can metabolize radiation in the dark, beneath polar ice, then the subsurface oceans of Europa and Enceladus, the ice-covered moons of Jupiter and Saturn, are not as uninhabitable as we assumed. What we found in the ice is not just a strange organism, it is a proof of concept. A demonstration that the definition of where life can exist is larger than we thought, considerably larger. This particle was traveling in the opposite direction. It came from below the Antarctic ice sheet, moving upward at an energy level that should not be physically possible for a particle traveling through that amount of dense matter. The standard model of physics does not contain a particle that can do this. Neutrinos can pass through matter, but not at this energy level on an upward trajectory through the Earth. The energies involved would require a particle to have interacted with dense matter in ways that existing physics cannot account for. The researchers published their findings. The physics community reviewed them. Several explanations were proposed. None have been confirmed. none fully account for what was detected. The leading hypothesis involves a class of particles called tau neutrinos, behaving in ways that would require new physics beyond the standard model to explain. The other hypotheses are more difficult to state without sounding like something other than science. The event has been detected more than once. The signal is consistent. It came from below the ice, traveling upward, and we do not know what sent it. We are still listening. What the ice keeps Antarctica has been accumulating secrets for 34 million years. Ancient forests, living viruses, animals that survived 24,000 years of freezing, mountain ranges no light has ever touched, organisms that consume radiation, a signal from below that physics cannot fully explain. We have been seriously studying this continent for less than a century. We have drilled into less than 1% of it. We have accessed a handful of its subglacial lakes out of hundreds. We have mapped its hidden geography from instruments that can see through ice, but never stood in the valleys themselves. The ice does not destroy what it takes. It holds it. Perfectly. Indefinitely. Which means that everything we have found so far is not the full inventory. It is the first page. Thank you for watching. If this made the world feel larger and stranger than it did before, share it with someone. See you next video.